I'm going to start the recording.
Oh, sorry. I just started it.
Great. Thank you. Down on top of it. How's everybody doing today?
Great. Thanks for asking. How are you?
Cold. I'm cold. It snowed last night. So, yeah. And I have the unfortunate, I have a aluminum desk. So it conducts cold and heat very well. So it's very cold. It's awesome. We can kick things off. I'm not sure if Nick is here yet or not. Is Nick here?
No, he was going to join next week and introduce himself.
Great. Well, I'll move this to next week. But Nick is here. He's a new designer based out of Denver, Colorado. He will be the third designer to round out our team and plan. So if you see him around Slack, introduce yourself. Otherwise, we'll wait to hear from him next week. Big picture updates. One of the things that I would like to do is just walk through. I'm going to try maybe do this once, one category each week, and not just mine, but any group within Plan should walk through theirs and just get feedback from the team. I think one of the things that I have missed being at GitLab thus far is having more collaboration around strategy and kind of big picture goals. Like I know I'm the DRI for it, but I also think that the team has valuable input and should contribute to it. I'd like to see everybody a little bit more involved in that. And even if that's just like talking to me, and then I will translate that into the actual like file. So I'm going to share my screen. I think I've tracked down my screen freezing to my external video camera. So I've disconnected that, but if my screen does freeze, I'll be back and you guys can just talk back. Still trying to like figure out what exactly the problem is. Cool. So you should be able to see my screen now. This is the category strategy for issue tracking. I wrote this a couple of months ago, or maybe like six to 8 weeks ago. I guess I updated this last. And I wanted to just kind of like talk through the purpose of the category and kind of the big picture and vision, and then kind of get some like pause for a minute to get feedback. So one of the things that wasn't necessarily on like all of the other category strategy pages was like the essential intent. And I tried to break that down. So if issue tracking could be excellent at only one thing, what would it be? And try to align this also to the company's vision and strategy and the dev section's vision and strategy. But from my standpoint, like it seems like by and large, the purpose of issue tracking is to provide a clear single source of truth for an idea from inception to implementation that the members of a community can trust and effectively collaborate on from anywhere within within the GitLab application without breaking or unnecessarily delaying a member's current flow. And I think this is like a big deal because like right now it's hard to know if an issue you can trust it, if it's updated, if it has the most recent things in it. There's just a lot of questions around that, but like we want ideas to be everyone to contribute to ideas and collaborate ideas, but there needs to still be a single source of truth for that. It needs to be very clear. Does this like jive with y'all, or does it sound like it's not the purpose of issue tracking, or it should be different? Because I kind of came up with this like in a box, but I would love some feedback on it if anybody has feedback.
I think that makes sense for where we're at. I mean, in my world, single source of truth is always a requirement, not an issue. An issue is how you change the single source of truth. But I realize that that's not a universal thing. So I think to the market we're looking at, issues are a single source of truth for most. So I think it makes good sense.
Any other feedback about this part? All right, cool. And the next part was like kind of how we'll know when we're done. And I think this is where it kind of sets some high level goals that we should strive for over the next several years. I mean, I'm planning on working on this for that long. So, and one of them is issues should take less than 1 second to load, and there's never more than 1 second delay in propagating changes on an issue to any member. And members never interact with issues that does not contain the most recent changes. So like this is a particular problem right now because like our comments take a long time to load. Issues in general take a long time to load depending on how many comments there are. If an issue is left open in my browser and I come back, there are things that are out of date on it unless I refresh my page and know to do that. And so like, that's where I've even run into this quite a bit at GitLab, where like issues are stale and I'm looking at them in a stale way, and then I try to do something and I get an error, and it's just not cool.
Do we have an open issue out there for how long it takes to load related issues? Because that seems to be the slowest part for me. Maybe that's different, but
I'm not sure if we have one specific for that, but we should open one to profile all of the slow parts of the issue, like the issue view, and systematically go through and knock out the highest performance problem first.
Sounds good.
The other thing is like within 15 to 30 seconds for seeing an issue above the fold, any community member can understand the purpose of the idea that's up to date and relevant, kind of how it contributes to the bigger goals of the community, the value of it, where it's at in its life cycle, what the next action is to move the idea forward, who owns it, and reasonable expectations when it will be fully implemented that can be trusted with a high level of certainty. And I think that's why issues that don't satisfy this criteria should not be trusted. And one of the goals is communities never have more than 1% of issues that are untrusted, and no single issue remains untrusted for more than 5 days. And we shouldn't rely on humans to determine whether an issue can be trusted or not. But humans are responsible for maintaining that trust. And this is an issue, one interesting thing that I put in here, because we have a lot of stale issues, and it hurts trust with the community, especially like when we say we're going to do something and it slips. I feel like we've kind of gotten a little complacent, being like, oh, well, it's not that big of a deal, we're working on it. But the thing is like, there's a lot of customers and wider community members that rely on that to make decisions for how they do things and what they invest in. And when they see like something slip from one milestone to the next, it starts to erode that kind of trust. And I've seen that this week in particular on a couple of issues. I brought it up in the product channel where it's just like, people say, I'm starting to lose faith in GitLab. And not because the product's bad, but because we don't do what we say. And I think it's not just us, it's like a real problem that any product development team faces, and everyone that I've been a part of struggles like with how to set expectations. So I think there's a lot of room to do that in a better way so that we build trust instead of like break trust. I don't know if anybody has any thoughts around that, but it seems like a big opportunity for us to not just make better relationships with our community members, but also to help everyone who uses our product do that within theirs too. Does that make sense?
I have a question. Do you see GitLab changing the way we do release in terms of like not promising what will be delivered next release, but instead working in a more like Kanban style, starting to work in what is the top priority and delivering as soon as it's done, and then picking the next one?
I personally would like that. I think in order to do that, we will have to demonstrate it within the confines of the milestone release pattern. So kind of how I see that playing out within our stage in particular is we're trying to adopt a more Kanban-ish style. And as we're able to do that and demonstrate that it helps us more reliably control throughput, and it's not like predictability over velocity, but you can have velocity and predictability. They're not mutually exclusive. And I think if we demonstrate that that's possible through the Kanban pull type system, then it will propagate more organically throughout the rest of the organization. But yes, I would ideally like to do that. I think that's a healthier way to work. But I also think one of the things that Sid has pointed out very clearly is like, don't slow down. Because once you slow down, it's hard to ever get back up to the speed you were at before. So I don't think we should look at this as in like slowing down how much we're delivering, but doing it in a more strategic way, sort of like you mentioned, where we do the highest value thing first, ship that, move to the next highest value thing, ship that. And I would love to see us work in that way if everybody's open to trying it.
Yeah, I think that's a good point, Gabe. And I'm glad that you kind of touched on the whole predictability versus velocity, because I feel like we've kind of tipped the scales a little bit too much toward the velocity, and predictability is way back in the kind of list of or queue of or order of things that we prioritize. And I think figuring out a way to balance it, to add a little bit more predictability while still keeping up with the velocity is going to be key for us to for us moving forward. So yeah, I'm on board with what you're saying.
Yeah, there's some simple mechanisms to do that, like, because we're already pointing issues. Like, and that's part of where I can just scroll down here a little bit, what's next and why. We're working on these big epics for managing sprint and release cadence, which is the multiple, like an issue can belong to multiple milestones. You have milestone types. But once we do that, and we can measure velocity and volatility from one milestone to the next over, like, if you have every of the same type, you can do, like, for the last n number of milestones, we've had an average of X velocity and a standard deviation, which is your volatility of, you know, a certain percentage. And that will give you the range to be able to set, like, the predictability of what you'll be able to deliver in a given release or a given sprint or whatever. And then if we want to move towards some more Kanban type style metrics, we'll look at lead time. So what's the time from when an issue is requested to when it's, like, completed, as well as cycle time from within each of the stages. And then, like, you can kind of understand once a issue enters this stage, then it will take about X number of days to get done. And even that, like, that's predictability. Like and we don't really have to change anything about the way we work other than just continue to estimate things. We just have to build in the data that helps us, like, get those measurements out in a more coherent way, if that makes sense. So
on a notion of trust, do you think that our large backlog is hurting the trust from the community? Because I've heard a lot of comments sort of outside of GitLab about how there's this huge backlog of features that have been proposed, and yet we're just driving forward with new features and adding more breadth, but we're not actually going back and fixing problems that have been around for 2 years. Have you heard that from anybody, or is that sort of an isolated thing?
I've heard that from lots of people.
Okay.
I felt that acutely as well.
Yeah.
Like,
I had people tell me that to my face at the reInvent booth.
Yeah. And I was wondering, I mean, if we start adding, you know, issues to epics and add epics, you know, and we kind of sort of start making a hierarchy of issues, the ones that fall out and don't really belong to a specific category, does it make sense for us to go back through and annotate on those that, hey, these don't currently fit within the product vision, and just put something more final on those? Because I feel like there's a lot of open issues that we kind of know aren't going to get done anytime soon because they're not something that really aligns with our strategy right now. But I don't know if we're actually effectively communicating that to people.
Probably not. I know for me, it took me a little while to figure out what the strategy was and where we were going to be going. I think there's also the problem where some of the ideas are good, but, like, I would be fine if they went into the product, but I can't prioritize them, right? A good case in point is custom emojis, right? Everybody, like, there's been, like, a cult following of people, like, bugging me to work on custom emojis, and I think it's a great thing to add, but it doesn't add any intrinsic business value. When I look at companies that will not use our planning features because we don't have certain things like better support for Scrum, you know, and being able to calculate velocity, like, we can't gain market share and we can't gain traction unless we have those things. It's hard for me to justify then, like, going off and doing custom emojis, which is, like, a nice quality of life thing, but it doesn't add business value necessarily, you know?
I don't know anybody who's going to not use our product because we don't have the emoji they want. I mean, that's hopefully that's not the case.
No, but it makes the product better. I mean, we love custom emojis in Slack, and I get why it's important.
Yeah.
But it's also the kind of thing, like, I don't want to close those issues because I think it's fine if the community wants to pick it up. But you know, it's hard. It's hard. I do think that there are criteria where we should go back and close issues and be kind of just, like, straightforward about it.
Well, even if we're not closing them, if we put them on an epic that was, like, you know, waiting for community contribution or something that shows that we've actually looked at it, we've evaluated it, and it currently doesn't fit in our business plan, how do we annotate that or denote that in a way that says this is a great feature, we agree that we'd love to see it implemented, but it's just not in the cards in the next year?
We could create that epic and dump stuff in there, just being like, would love community contributions for these. Like, I think we have the label that gets annotated automatically by GitLab triage.
Yeah.
But, like, that's where it's hard, is, like, the labels get updated by a bot, but nobody looks at it. And so maybe somebody thinks that we've looked at it, but we haven't. And yeah.
When it throws that label on stuff that I I don't know. I don't often know if I want community contributions of some of the things it throws the label on, and if you take the label off, it puts it back. So there's some things I've written up that are follow-ons to like requirements management and things like that, where I don't really want the community contributing just yet to those. They're not mature enough, and I don't know if we'd have enough guidance for the community to be effective in that contribution. But you can't seem to get rid of that label. So it's a label that I know is applied to things that don't necessarily, it shouldn't necessarily be applied to.
Yep.
Yeah, I wonder if we should fix that problem then, because ideally, I think it's something like everything that goes into the backlog will automatically get that accepting merge request label. There might be another rule to it, but we should figure out what that rule is, because we want to take, and I know at least on the front end side, there are contributors that are looking for that label in determining what to pick up, but there's so many that we on the GitLab internal side don't really have any control over prioritizing some of those things. So we should figure out what the rules are for that label and start using it a little bit better. I know also on the front end we've been just adding like a weight of 1 to things that are in the backlog that we're hoping to get community contribution from, but that are just fairly simple to work on. And we've been finding, like during the hackathons, that those are the ones that are actually picked up first. So that's kind of a way that we're encouraging community contributions on things that we really want done. I also wanted to touch just real quick on the perception from external folks on GitLab working on too much as opposed to focusing on our current product stability, essentially. Do we think the problem is because our backlog is so large, or because of the whole breadth versus depth conversation? That mostly a question for product.
The backlog being very large is more of an indication. It's more of a symptom, not the actual problem. I think what I'm hearing from most people that I've talked to is you have all these, CI/CD features and all these security features and all these things that don't necessarily apply to every business, and yet you don't have things like blocking issues or very basic features. So what they're saying is, yeah, you've got a great product, but instead of fixing just really basic features that would make you more competitive, you're adding on, more security scanning. And it's not that they don't care about security, it's that they're never going to get to security scanning if they can't do basic issue management. And I think that's sort of their point, is all of those things are nice. There's existing tools that do them. I don't necessarily want to use those, but I can. What I can't do is I can't work around fundamental problems in your product. And if I could have fundamental functionality in your product, I would be using external tools and your product. And as you added those external tools to make them internal, I'd be happy to roll over to them. But I cannot work around a fundamentally flawed, in their mind, product just because it offers me all this extra scanning that I don't necessarily care about, for example. So I think that's really the thing I'm hearing. And the thing I'm seeing is a large backlog kind of reinforces that. And it shows that, hey, there's 20,000 open issues out there. Do these guys ever go back and fix these problems? That's the perception, because they already have a preconceived idea. A huge backlog just sort of piles on and says, hey, that's a symptom of this. They're not fixing the core problems. And instead of marching forward and adding new features, instead of actually making the features they have really, really solid.
Yeah, like a good example, right, these are the top user issues. I need to update this probably with current counts from the last time I did this. But folks were frustrated on this Trello power up that we're not investing more in our integration with Trello and the power up so that we can attach issues, right? But for me, I think that's great. I mean, it's cool if somebody wants to do that, but that doesn't help make our planning functionality better, right? And I think that's where it's hard, is people want this and it's wanted from the community, but it doesn't align with our immediate business goals and what's best for the customers. And so they get frustrated because they want us to do this, but we want to make our own stuff better too at the same time. And so we only have a finite amount of resources. And there's a couple examples of these, like desktop push web notifications. This would be great, but it's like not the biggest thing that is preventing people from using our planning tools. Same things with like remove list labels when closing an issue. Like this is a small-ish type thing that we could probably do, but to do this right, there's like overlapping solutions with like creating triage workflows within GitLab itself. And so like I'm hesitant to want to do that because it's just adding another configuration on the label level instead of doing it like a more elegant solution. So I'm struggling with this particular one, but there's like lots of things like this across the entire product where the wider community has clearly said like, hey, these are things like that are kind of smallish that are really important to us that we want you to do. And we're not doing some of them because, they're higher priority issues that we've determined that will help our customers and help our business better in a more expedient way, if that makes sense. So I think that's where there's a lot of like frustration.
Yeah, there's the kind of like to Mark's point, there's fundamental ones as well as like, I understand the integration with the outside systems kind of, I totally get that. But like, being able to create an issue from an epic, like that comes up in every conversation I have with somebody who's thinking of using Plan or is currently using Plan. And, they ask it like, hey, it's been in the backlog. You guys are working on it. That's great. Oh, okay, cool. But what about blocking issues? Well, that's coming too. But those are fundamental items to any planning tool that if we don't get those across the line, we still just maintain that really shallow layer of functionality. And we just can't win conversations against Jira with that.
Yep.
Well, the other thing to remember is where the market is coming from. We can't win conversations against Jira because our planning is letting us down and our issue tracking is very good, but our planning is letting us down. In Jira, they're not integrating a single source solution for all the security scanning, CI/CD, all of that. That's something they're used to not having built in. What they're used to having bundled as a product is planning and issues. That is what all the products on the market currently do. So if they're trying to replace a product, they need to replace not just the issue tracking, but the planning as well. And we're not offering currently a deep enough solution for them to feel they can actually make that jump, especially when we get to large corporate users. I think, and that's what we're trying to fix, obviously, but I think that sort of underscores what Keenan was saying is all that other stuff is great, but they need to replace a planning and issue tracking tool, and that's what they're looking for.
And it's not often like it's usually not the dev users that get hung up on this. It's the management, especially on the product side, on the director side, on the business side, and they're the ones with the purse strings. So like a lot of conversations I have with engineering based users, they're like, no, we love you, we're great, but we can't convince management to move over because XYZ. And they won't move over to a full system until we have that. We can't get an update. Like we can't get our accounts upgraded to starter or just get premium or ultimate unless we have these things because it doesn't fit the niche that management has to scratch.
Yeah. I think this is an ongoing conversation that we should talk about. Given time, I want to move on to some of the other things. The things that I would love though is for everybody to take a look at the issue tracking strategy in more detail and either like provide feedback in a Slack channel or whatever channel you feel is best. If you have suggestions or things that you feel strongly about or things that aren't there or that should be there or that shouldn't be there that are, let's talk about that. And I think maybe next week, if Keenan or Mark, you guys want to pick one of your categories to go through, that'd be awesome. And I think this is something that we should do on an ongoing regular basis because like the only way, like everybody on this call has a different perspective than the product managers, and it's a valuable perspective, and it has like data points that we aren't exposed to, and so we really need everybody to collaborate and contribute to this. The vision, the strategy is like a team thing, as far as I'm concerned. I'm just like the person who's the wrangler and like gets it all together and gets the changes made. So, all right, cool.
Actually, just on that, this was great. Yeah, I really enjoyed it. I think what we should do just to avoid, we canceled the last two of these because we didn't have anything on the agenda. We should just lay these out, like starting at the beginning of the year. Just say like this week we're going to talk about this one, next week this one, next week this one, just so we can lay out a timeline of it, and then we know what's coming and we can prepare for the conversations too.
Cool. I'll add a rotation into the weekly meeting format, and like maybe in a big picture update, it'll just be the categories in some given order, and then we'll just cycle through that. And as we add new categories or change things, we can just update that flow.
Yeah, I think that just
cool. Sounds good. Good idea.
Hey, before we end, move on. Nick is here, so our new product designer, Nick. So I just wanted to give him a chance to introduce himself, tell us where he was before GitLab, why he joined, where he lives, and what he likes to do for fun. So Nick, can you take it away?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Hi, everyone. Nice to meet you all. As mentioned, I'm Nick Brandt. I'm the new product designer on Plan. I guess prior to this, I worked at Mozilla for a couple of years where I was focused on a password manager they called Lockwise. So I designed the iOS, Android experience for that, as well as assisted with the desktop work as well. Prior to that, I worked at a lot of consultancies, most recently Pivotal Labs. So I worked on kind of like a various workload of different clients and different industries for various products. In terms of like what I like to do in my free time, hang out a lot with my dog and my wife. A lot of times go on hikes, walks around the area. A lot of times we just check out different breweries in the area just because Colorado has quite a few of those. And I also like to go do things like bowling. We bought a house a couple years ago as a big fixer-upper, so I've been in a lot of my free time kind of working on that as well. But yeah, it's a bit about myself. I'm starting to set up some coffee chats with different individuals, so I'll probably be sending out some invites to some of you guys as well. But yeah, good to meet you all and excited to join the team.
Welcome,
Thanks,
Nick.
Welcome.
Keenan, he's in your neck of the woods.
Oh yeah, we chatted yesterday. We're best friends now.
Yep.
I feel like GitLab is like taking over Denver, the Denver area. There's like 45 or 50 people there now or something like that.
Well, I think that's Colorado in general, which is,
Yeah.
it sounds like more close-knit than it actually ends up being. Like we've got some folks up in like Steamboat Springs, which is quite a drive. It's in clear weather. It's quite a drive.
Nice.
But yeah, at Boulder and Denver, I think we've got 20 at this point, so which is pretty good.
Cool. All right, I'm gonna hop over to 3A. We have 15 minutes or 15 minutes, 10 minutes left, something like that. Anything I can do to help get not filtering done in 12.6? It's been, we've missed 3 milestones, and I would like to see it be done. It's one of those that's like dragged on and on and on and on and on. And I get why it's complicated, but it's like, I'm just asking if there's anything I can do personally, like sink time into to help get it over the line.
Yeah, I'd really love to get it done in 12.6 too. So we talked about it last week, and the hope was to get it to, it's almost there. The hope was to get it to review on Monday. Unfortunately, Rajat got really sick, and he's been out this week. So I've been trying to just get in touch with him to get the whatever he was going to submit for an MR so I can push it across the line. I'm hoping to hear back from him today to get that done. So I'm still fairly confident, because just looking at his last comment also is that he was fairly confident at the beginning of 12.6 that he'll be able to get into 12.6. And last time I talked to him, he was still feeling the same way. So fairly confident we're really close. I just need to get in touch with him to get that MR submitted. So hopefully it'll be submitted in today, ideally, today or tomorrow, and then we can get it up to gitlab.com for the Monday deployment of next week.
Get it, Donald, get it.
I'll get it.
All right, 3B WIP limits. I feel like given our review and verification process, should probably go in today. I know Scott's been working on it. I'm not worried about it. I feel like we're at a point where we can either ditch a little bit of scope and get it in now. So I think we should go ahead and do that. Just like, I'll ping him later today when he's online. I think it's like really early where he is still, 7 o'clock or something. And just let him know that, but let's get that going so that we can get it in at least the first MVC of it. All right, Keenan, you got the next one?
Yeah, sorry, real quick on the WIP limits.
Yeah.
We were just stuck on a feature flag bug, and that was figured out yesterday. So same thing, I think that one's pretty close to, perhaps not the weight side of it, but for issue count, getting that WIP limit in for review today.
Cool.
Yeah, so referenced this one earlier, but the create issue from Epic, that one slipped twice already, and it's a hot topic. So just curious how we were feeling about this one making it this time.
Yeah, so that one is currently in, I believe it just got UX reviewed and approved. It is on the final, the front end's on the final maintain, the back end's done. It's in. The front end is at maintainer review. Kushal took a look at that. He just had one question. I'll touch base with Winnie to make sure he can respond to that today, but it's looking pretty good to get that merged in today.
Okay.
I'm a little worried because it is behind a feature flag, which means this one will go into GitLab.com on Monday, and then we'll turn on the feature flag for a group maybe, or maybe we can go ahead and just turn it on for everyone, but it won't be defaulted on. I don't know, maybe we should just create an MR early next week to default that on so we can still get it in to the release posting 12.6.
Okay. Yeah, like I said, this one comes up in every conversation I have with prospects or customers. It comes up in every conversation I have with anyone in leadership now. And it's one of the ones that gets flagged for that Gartner demo review at the end of January. So,
and I want it. I want to create it.
I keep getting lost in all my tabs.
Yeah.
No. Okay. I appreciate that update, Donald. Thank you.
I don't know. I know the blocking issues currently is I think with backend. So I'm not really sure what their status is. I don't know, Donald, if you had any idea where they were. I know that I think John is now out of office. So he had mentioned getting back to me about it. I didn't hear back from him. So
let me follow up on this. Unless Kong, I see you're on. Do you know what the status of the back end? We talked about it earlier this week that the front end is almost ready for, or I think already ready for review. But there's another.
Yes. So I think the back end at the final stage of review. I think it's a container review. Can you hear me okay now?
I can possibly, I think I got the back end is in review. I think so. I'll touch base and I'll
that's
touch
fine.
Base with you, Mark.
Awesome, thanks.
It looks like he
Boom,
dropped.
there we go.
Yeah.
Back end's in maintainer review, so it's looking pretty good.
Cool. I think I got the next one. Just a quick discussion / to bring this to everyone's attention so that they can contribute to it if they would like to, which would be cool. We're trying to just clarify the product development workflow from a cross-functional standpoint. And I think I like this flow here. And the next step is to put this as a proposal into the handbook as a whole. Although, as we've been shopping this around, just like different groups, I dropped this in the weekly product meeting yesterday and got some other folks to kind of start participating in it. There's pushback that more or less like solution validation should be owned by UX with participation by the entire product team. And like, I think that is largely true, but also like not, and that the reason why we put engineering managers as the person who like moves from solution validation to planning breakdown is like, that is the last gate to make sure that the solution that UX and product have been collaborating on together is like feasible and possible. And I didn't know, I just want to have a quick chat about this issue as a whole before we take the next step and put it into a proposal for the handbook.
Yeah, I think specifically on that solution validation one, that's going to be one I think it'll be beneficial to get, I don't know, like Scott Williamson's take on it. Because I know he wrote a lot of this when he came in, and I'm curious what his intentions were, because I know what this meant in a previous life with him, but I don't know if he's changed his mind about it. My whole take is if we're talking about like solution, it has to be the whole solution. Like, I think just having a conversation that's mainly only UX and product doesn't solve the whole problem, because then what we're really doing is just forcing that conversation into planning breakdown. And so the question is, like, is planning breakdown, is that to really just say, hey, we know what this is and let's cut it up into the right pieces so that we can organize it and move it forward through a good sequence? Or is planning breakdown really engineering planning and then planning breakdown? Like, solution validation feels like the right spot to actually have that really hard collaborative conversation as a group. And then, I don't know, I feel like engineering is then empowered to be like, you are asking for something crazy in that stage as a point to say, this is the gate. Once we get past there, we should all be on the same page on what it is and how big it is, so that engineering is then free to make the decisions and choices they need to without any additional conversations with product or UX to really get there. I think that's how I've always done it. That's how I see it. I've seen it work. We're just pushing that conversation further to the right, and I think we need to keep it as far left as we can. That's my take.
I agree with that. That's why I think, like, product and UX drive the initial part of the solution validation phases, especially like the designs and what we're dreaming up. But at the end of the day, like, if you end up going down that road and like investing a ton of time in designing this solution that is deemed incredibly complex and expensive to implement, then it's just a waste of time and energy and money. And I think the goal of having like the cross-functional, like, hard conversations in the validation stages, so that you can determine that, your ideal solution fits within an acceptable budget, basically. So
yeah, I took the first crack at this when I put those labels in the responsible party. And the reason I put it as engineering and transition of EM is, I want, when they come out of solution validation, I want the engineering managers to say, I understand the problem, we can solve it, the design is valid, and we will work it. We have everything we need to work it. That was the whole intent, because I feel too often what's happening is, between product and UX, we're designing things, and then we sort of toss over the wall to engineering. Then they have to send it back and go, hey, there's still questions, or you didn't answer these details, or we need more information. And that was the whole point, is I want to have that discussion in solution validation, because then when it hits planning breakdown, they can have at it. If they want to break it down front and back end, fine. If they want to break it down into 3 front end issues, fine. I don't really care how it's broken down, but I agree. The solution validation, when we exit that phase, that is the sort of the final step of saying, hey, everything is here, it can be implemented. And that's not to say that more questions can't be asked, but there needs to be that first pass of this is good enough. And I think that's how I view it, at least. I don't know, maybe I'm out in the wind on this one, but
UX or engineering, do you guys have any inputs?
Yeah, Donald, it's your feet on the platform for this one. What do you think?
Yeah, no, I agree with what you are all saying. The comment here, solution validation, about making sure that the design thing is the right thing. I kind of feel like that gate should happen in the design phase that we added after the initial rollout of this. If we have the workflow design and workflow solution validation both owned by by UX, I feel like we're not going to get a whole lot of there's not going to be a whole lot of workflow solution validation. We're just going to eventually skip that phase and just move over to the engineering phase or the build phase. And then at that point, if we're doing more of the evaluation, like Mark said, we'll kind of just toss it back into the workflow design phase. And there's going to be a lot of back and forth, a lot of handoffs, which is something we definitely want to get rid of or get away from. But we should all, I'd love to hear, Alexis, Holly, Nick, your thoughts on this, because I don't think we've been, I don't know, maybe on the plan stage, we haven't just been following the workflow to the book, but I don't feel like we've been using solution validation as a UX step.
So I think you bring up a really good point. I feel like the solution validation part of the development flow wasn't reevaluated after we added that design stage in. So I wonder if that's why this a lot outside of this proposal. Like, I wonder if that's why some of the feedback we're getting is what it is, because the design stage came in to help solve the UX side of the equation. But I don't know if we didn't go back and restate what solution validation would be if design now has its own workflow. So maybe that's part of the problem.
Yeah, I think there's some ambiguity around what that design column is. And I think how I took solution validation is that that's when we may get more heavily involved with the research team, or we might be doing that research ourselves. But I would almost expect that we are validating that things are viable or feasible to do before we reach that step of testing, that like we're including engineers in that design phase before we get like too far down the line, and then we're like testing out a solution that doesn't make sense technically anyway. Or we're taking maybe something that's too big and then breaking it down at that planning breakdown phase. I don't know, do you have any thoughts, Holly or Nick here?
I feel the same way, actually. I would like to have an engineer involved as early as possible so that we can start getting that technical feedback beforehand. I ideally would never like to see us just tossing a design over to engineering without them having been involved in some of the design decisions from the start and offering feedback early on. So I agree as well.
Yeah, and I think we should just stress that just because we have decision gates doesn't preclude collaboration before that. I think what we're really just trying to do is put a stake in the ground that says, like, the decision was made at this point by this party to move forward, and that doesn't mean that we can't include other folks throughout the process.
A basic rule I've always had for these types of things is the people that let it out, like whoever owns it in the next phase needs to have a strong say in releasing it from the previous phase. I don't want to have responsibility to release things out of solution validation to planning breakdown for engineering unless engineering is happy with the solution, because I don't want to force things down on them. I want them to say, yes, we're good. I really think they need to have a stake in releasing that back into their sort of workflow or development workflow, because otherwise we're just going to throw things over the wall. Even if we are collaborating on them, if we say, yeah, it's good enough, and we push it down, that's not getting their buy-in. That's forcing it on somebody. And I really think that it needs to be almost looked at the other way, which is, what are we accepting? If we can't convince them to accept it, then we need to do more work.
Yeah. So outcomes, I also think having engineering in earlier will help them propose solutions that could be less expensive, just because they understand the back end better. So like, would you want to say that how would we update the table at this point? Like, where UX more or less like swap engineering and UX. So engineering pulls stuff out of design, and then UX signs off on stuff before it gets pulled into planning breakdown. Or
something that would be helpful for me is to have an understanding of kind of what the breakdown expectations are for each of these stages. Because to Alexis's point before, when I hear solution validation, I tend to think more of research and of verifying that the solution that we're looking into is actually a valuable solution for the customer. So we have the completion criteria, which is helpful, but what are some of the expected processes within each of these stages? That for me, that would offer a little bit of clarity. I don't know if that's true for anyone else. At least what would our goal be for each of those?
Yeah, maybe we since the notes column isn't being used, we can rework that to add like basic processes and break down by a function. If you look at the plan team page, I tried to kind of capture that in my weird Venn diagrams of the different functional roles at the top of each stage. It's like not very clear, but I think being more explicit in this table would also help it translate better into the handbook. So I'll take the next action of like updating that column, and then we'll go through another round of feedback, and then we can maybe move to the MR stage with the handbook.
I think that sounds good. And I wouldn't expect for it to be consistently always do these things in these stages, but it could at least be some guidelines, especially with all the new people coming in. It's just helpful to have some clarity there.
Yeah, and I'll probably do it outcomes based instead of like how you do it or what you do, but just like the outcome that we're shooting for within each functional area. So that way, like, people can figure out how to get there however they want. All right, cool. I think I have the next one real quick. We have 5 minutes left, so we can go through this pretty quick with capacity planning. one of the things that, to help us be more, not predictable, but set better expectations is like how I like to look at it. I don't really care about predictability. I care about building trust. And I also don't want to lose velocity. One of the things that I've had a lot of one-on-one conversations with other product managers and other groups, and the feedback has been pretty consistent where some groups don't use issue weights to calculate velocity or do whatever. But the one thing that's pretty universal is that nobody knows how capacity planning is done. And I think that's where, like, in looking at what our own handbook entries for our back-end and front-end teams, like, we say that we use issue weights as a lightweight way of doing capacity planning, but we don't document clearly like what it is or what our capacity has been historically. And I'm just wondering for this one, as we continue to explore this, if we can, each of the engineering managers can work with their teams to like update the handbook with like, here's how we actually calculate capacity, and here's what our capacity has been historically over the last several releases as a starting point, not just for, it would help me, but also help communicate to the rest of like other groups how we do it, so that at least there's visibility into that. And I want to get kind of thought from everybody on that.
I think that, so we should continue the conversation in the issue, just so John and Sean can contribute to it also. But yeah, no, I think that's a good idea. We in each of our groups, we have a little blurb on how, it's just a short one and it needs to definitely be more detailed, but on how we do capacity planning currently. But we don't really include like, these are the, if we choose to use weights, just an example, these are the weights that we've hit in the past couple of releases. This is what we're using as an average to determine what our capacity is for the next release. We don't have any of that kind of data in there, so I think it would be helpful to add that. And I don't really see many drawbacks to being a little bit more not transparent, but just visible about those or with that type of data. So no, I'm all for including that. But I'll add my comments there into the issue beyond what I put in there, and then we'll hopefully get feedback from Sean and John also.
Yeah. Well, and this is great too, because as we can learn from this internally, that's going to help inform how we actually define solving capacity planning for customers, which is something we're going to need to provide as well. So this is a good internal exercise to dig into that.
Yeah. One other thing, Donald, would you, like, I know a little bit of SQL, but not enough to do things super quickly. And one of the things that I would like to do as part of this is use our team as guinea pigs for prototyping what we're going to build in the product in terms of velocity and like other sorts of metrics. And I think we could probably do that via Periscope and writing a couple of dashboards. So I don't know if you would be willing to pair with me on that for a couple hours over the next several weeks, but that could be something I feel like that would be pretty valuable. So at least we can understand like if these graphs are meaningful to us and if it's the right sort of data, if it helps make better decisions, and then like use that as a baseline of saying like, are we actually improving because we are looking at this data or not? Because if we're not improving or doing getting better from a process standpoint by using the data, then the data is not the right data to be looking at. So I don't know if you're willing, but I would love a partner.
No, that sounds good. Yeah, let's do it.
Cool. All right, 1 minute left. Anybody have anything else they want to cover before we're done?
Can you add me those calls too? Because I'd like to understand that.
Yes. If anybody else, if they want to come, let me know. Ping me in the Slack channel, team Slack channel. All right, if we have nothing else, we are at time. This is probably the first time we've ever used up every minute of this call, which has been great. Thank you for coming, for participating. And please, anyone can add stuff to the agenda, and I encourage everybody to for next week. Have a good day.
Bye, team.
Bye.